The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I am your host, Eamon Brennan of Buzzer at EamonBrennan.com. That's my newsletter. Go check it out. Also here, Basket Under Review, the best and coolest new college basketball website on the planet. I'm back again with Tate, Frazier from The Ringer. We are going to do some stock rising, stock falling from Feast Week. We're going to take stock, quite literally, of just a whirlwind of a week and whirlwind of travel for both of us. So, a little catch up, a little deep breath here is good. We're going to talk about the games coming up this week, which again is another fantastic non-conference week of college basketball stretching into the weekend. Before that, we've got conference challenge games on Tuesday and Wednesday night and into Thursday too, right? Lots of good stuff going on. And we're going to talk about the net quickly, mostly for fun. I want to encourage people not to get too crazy about the net. But before we get to all that, want to mention, as we always do, go check out basketunderreview.com. Like I said, it's the home of this show. It's been a real pleasure doing this show in association with people whose work I really respect, in association with the community over there, which pre-exists the website, is thousands of people strong in Trilly Donovan's Discord. It's where he breaks news. For $10 a month, you get access to all that. You get all the written stuff that goes up on the site every single day. That's high level and super intelligent. Will make you a smarter and more dialed in college basketball fan. You also support this show, which we put out for free every week, and all the other unpaid free content we put out on podcast feeds and YouTube all week, basically every day. So go check out the website, sign up, support us, and thank you to everyone at Basket Under Review for all the great work that they're doing. Also check out our presenting sponsor, homefieldapparel.com. Homefield is the best, and they've got fresh stuff they want us to mention to you guys. It's not just me saying, hey, go check out Homefield and tell them we sent you, buy a hat or a shirt or something. You can still do that, but they've also got a tour coming up. Live tour at college basketball games. It's called the Homefield House Tour. It tips off Saturday in Indianapolis for the Louisville, Indiana game. They'll be outside the arena with like a tent and a live experience type of deal. I'm sure they'll also have some stuff to sell you, which you should buy. You should go there, say, hey, I heard about this on the Basket Under Review podcast. Those guys are great. Please keep sponsoring their show. They really appreciate you. That would be fantastic. So thank you again to Homefield for sponsoring our show. Go check out the tour. Check out their socials to find the full list of dates. They'll be at the Jimmy V Classic next week, Auburn, Purdue in Indianapolis, December 20th. And then there's a whole list all the way through February of the live stuff that they're doing. So thank you again to Homefield. Go check them out, and cheers, Homefield. Okay, the spiel is done. We're into the show. Tate, you're back from your travels. You're back from Feast Week. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. A lot of basketball, a lot of football, a lot of, drama, I guess would be the best term for it. I mean, the sports world is booming right now. I mean, you got Black Friday deals all over the place. I think we're recording this on a Cyber Monday right now. SEC Coaching Carousel Day would be the SEC Coaching Carousel Sunday. So, again, in the midst of all that, we got a lot of great basketball. Players Era Festival, there was a lot of conversation. I liked our conversation about it, but it felt like there was a war within the media, the college basketball infrastructure, about where this really belongs, what the future looks like. But again, the games are great. Maui Invitational still got a little bit of a Maui bump for USC. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. And of course, I feel like Vanderbilt was kind of the talk of the town amongst some of the people in my life. So a lot of good basketball, a lot of good games, and a lot of good storylines, which you and I, we love the storyline. So I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. Vanderbilt, just want to mention off the top, we'll get to them, but an Eamon Brennan Basket Under Review Final Four pick.
Oh,
preseason.
Just there you go.
It's looking good. I'm looking pretty good. You'd get much worse odds on it now, I guess, actually, in terms of value than you would have at the time.
If only the people believed Eamon from the start, they would have probably gotten that number at a crazy number. So listen to Eamon.
Yep. And on the ground floor. And now look where we are. It's still December 1st, but
we got a long way to go. Right.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. But yeah, so let's jump into our, what I'm calling stock rising, stock falling. I'm blatantly ripping this off from one of my favorite Arsenal podcasts. They do it after every game for players who played particularly well, from their baseline. Right. So, a good way to understand the concept is like UConn had a good week, beat Illinois, but we know UConn's good. We probably think UConn's a little better than Illinois going into the week. So stock's holding steady, right?
Mm-hmm.
But stock rising teams during Feast Week. Well, first of all, I have a stock rising / falling. Then, and you alluded to it at the start. The Players Era founders have somehow both lost stock, and their stock has also risen. So like we talked about the event a lot last week, and we talked about the backlash, and I think the backlash got worse even after. Like I saw more of it after we recorded our show, and I kind of responded to a couple tweets being like, hey, check out what Tate and I had to say about it, because I felt like we were somewhat in a minority among quote unquote national media people of really not liking the event. And maybe it's just because we weren't there and we weren't covering it, and the experience of covering it was a lot more enjoyable than watching some of the emptier gyms at home.
They didn't pay us even. That's really the story. There was no payola.
Exactly right. Yeah, I didn't get any kind of payola to promote it. So, but look, in seriousness, I don't think people did. I just think there was a divide there between what it was like to cover the event and see these games in quick succession at nice arenas versus seeing empty gyms at home when you'd rather see these teams play in Maui or obviously on campus if possible. So there's that element to it. There was also the format element, which is the number one thing that's like fixable about the event that would make it better, even if people would still dislike the overall concept of running this big NIL event that sort of eats all of these more traditional MTEs this specific week. And as we recorded last week, the founders of the Players Era and even after, a day or two after, seemed pretty insistent they were going to stick with this AAU style, margin of victory formula, and then average margin of victory gets you, your seed for the next round, and that's who you end up playing. We saw this was easily predictable before the event started. Really kind of screw over a team like Iowa State, which had two of the best wins of the first 2 days, and then ended up playing Syracuse in their last game when they really should have been playing a Michigan, a Gonzaga, a Tennessee, something like that, right? A Kansas, whatever the case may be. So there was enough backlash to that specific aspect of the event that it sounds like we're now leaning, and by we I mean the Players Era folks are now leaning toward changing the format again next year. And it changed. It seemed to change the mood music on that seemed to change within like a day or two. That would go a long way to making me at least feel better about the experience of watching the event, of like knowing, okay, this team wins, then they play this team. If that team wins also, like, let's just keep it simple. So somehow the Players Era, the folks who did it, who I think seem well-intentioned and have a decent idea going, if the execution is a little off, somehow came out with less stock and also more as they seek to expand this event next year and maybe iron out some of the specific things about it that were annoying as a viewer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think you make a good point where it is good. I'll give some credit to those guys that it does seem like they're willing to adjust and be nimble. So that's like kind of the nice front end. But I think the harsh part of the reality that we live in is that when you have these events that are changing and moving and shifting so much, that it really does push people away because they don't understand. And when people don't understand, they disengage, right? They ignore it. And I think that's really the worrisome part about this whole thing. And I saw Maui, I can't remember the Maui Now, they did like a nice they had a bunch of coaches where they kind of commented on why the Maui Invitational was kind of in flux, what the future looks like. And this is what Kelvin Sampson said. He said, quote, "They're giving us $1 million. That's why we're there. I would say that's why all the teams are there. We didn't sign up for this to have a tournament where we could play each other. We signed up for this because they're giving us $1 million. If they decided to put a court down at some vacant lot and they give us $1 million, I'd go play there too." So I think that kind of sums up where we are. And I think that's the icky nature that you and I sort of, discussed at a higher level, where there is a little bit of frustration there. But I think Kelvin Sampson, the rest of these coaches and programs that are in this event, they're not really hiding behind the fact that they're not trying to put on a show here. They're just trying to let you know that this is why they're there. The Players Era Festival is letting you know that's why they're holding the event. So it's an understandable situation. Everybody's getting paid money. We get that aspect of it. But I just want to have an event where you understand the structure, you understand when it is, you understand sort of the pageantry tradition, or try to build a tradition out of it. And it does feel like every year we're just keep changing, this whole situation. And that's just going to get people, like I said, to ignore it or keep their hands away from, kind of tuning in and buying in all the way. And I want everybody to buy in because we want as many people as possible to be watching these events, because again, the basketball is great. And we're going to talk about the basketball. So, that's really what should be at the forefront. But unfortunately, all the business, it feels like the business decisions are at the front and the basketball's on the back end. And that's not a good recipe for success, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean that's what we talked about. I think, in like, with some, not a ton of, we weren't like ranting and raving or like, gnashing our teeth, but there was some emotion to with us last week just because it is conflicting. I want to watch good teams play good basketball games. And I'm kind
Mm-hmm.
of like Kelvin Sampson in that regard. If you tell me they're playing in a vacant lot, I'll go watch Houston play Tennessee in a vacant lot. I don't care either. Really, you know what I mean? Really. But
Right.
on the other hand, the entertainment product of college basketball uh, is inextricably tied to pageantry, to home court environments, to the kinds of things that you can't get at the same level in professional sports. It's a big part of the reason why college football is so popular. Again, college football is fun to watch. I enjoy college football. It's not a better product than the NFL, and no one pretends otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not half the point. And so, the more you on the one hand want to see good teams play as many good teams as possible in November. On the other hand, people in charge of the sport, and I think coaches play a role in this too, need to keep in mind that the overall organic health of college basketball, what is going to generate more revenue for 10 and 20 years and not just next year for your roster, is the stuff that the players era didn't really deliver on this season. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the stuff that I think, again, we may be in 5 years talking about the players era is awesome. I can't wait to see it. Like the crowds are great. And, the 32 team format's really taken off and cemented my love of this historic event. It's going to take a while to get there. And I do think, part of the stock falling aspect, it was so dominated by this discussion, the meta discussion of it, that it overshadowed the basketball, at least online. And some of the hyperbole that you got on the broadcast. That there was a lead in from one of the anchors before the Gonzaga Michigan game claiming it was the best non-conference game in decades.
Adam
And
Lefkoe,
you're just kind
yeah.
of like, you just feel, buddy, like, get your fired up, but like, that's not connecting to people at home. I'm excited for this game too. I'm arguing with my brother over the TV at his house, over Thanksgiving. Like, we got to put this on, man. I'm sorry. Like, it's non-negotiable. But that stuff I think fell on deaf ears for a lot of people. And I do think we'll be back here again next year, probably with a lot of the same backlash, and the move to 32 teams is probably going to annoy some people as well. So hopefully the basketball continues to live up. It did in many ways. Obviously, the product on the court was really, really strong. And I think we have to start the biggest stock rising of the entire feast week with Michigan. I think we like talking about Wake Forest nearly beating them a couple weeks ago. I hate to do this to Wake Forest fans. I'm sorry to have this be the lead thing we say about Michigan. But that was like, oh man, that's a gut punch of a loss, for your at-large candidacy down the line, because Michigan's going to be a good team. I'm thinking like Michigan's a 3 seed, 4 seed, top 20 team, top 25 team, top, whatever. And it turns out Michigan might be like the team, based on how they performed in the non-conference. It was like a UConn of their national title seasons level performance in a big marquee event against really high quality teams. And they come out of it looking like not just one of the best teams in the country, but a team of the likes of which we saw last year at the top of the sport, where you're like looking like in the past decade of adjusted efficiency numbers and defensive numbers and being like, these guys could play against anybody in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and I had my stock, the state of Michigan. I had Michigan State kind of coupled in there. I think both those programs looked great during Feast Week, but Michigan specifically, the issue that you had and I had as we watched them against Wake Forest was what's going on with this offense? What's happening with the turnovers, right? Like, why is Yaxel Lindeborg kind of in the corner and not really involved in the offense as much? And this week we saw kind of the full version, the formalized version of what Dusty May wants this group to look like. That front court, everybody's trying to figure out, who the best front court in the country is. Florida kind of had the de facto, okay, they're all coming back, so obviously they get the right answer. But it does look like with those three guys, with Johnson, with Mara, and with Lindeborg, when they are unleashed like they were in this event, it's really hard to, kind of dispel them as not the best front court in the country. And really turnovers to me is the real story with this team. Early on before Feast Week, they were averaging around a little north of 15 turnovers a game, which is not so great. In this tournament, they're around like 11 turnovers a game. I think it ended up, pushing up, if you want to round up to 12 turnovers. But again, that was the difference for me. Cadeau was better with the basketball. When Burnett is shooting 50% from three, that makes everybody look a whole lot better. But again, I think it starts with the front court. I mean, they have such an advantage because that front court is so good playing with each other. They were doing all these dummy Iverson cuts to get good looks. And from there, you just kind of saw, okay, here is the best version of Michigan. And I go back to the Coach K thing that he used to say, is it a blip or is it a bomb? I feel like this isn't a blip. You know, some of these tournaments, you get in a neutral site, you just have a great week, right? And then things don't really translate for the rest of the season. But I think for Michigan, my real big takeaway is if they protect the basketball and they don't turn the ball over, they're a really tough matchup for anybody. And I do feel like Lindeborg really hasn't fully unleashed his offensive apparatus. He did have some really good game scoring the basketball, obviously has scoring prowess, but I think he's only going to get better as the season goes on. And again, if Elliot Cadeau, their point guard, obviously from North Carolina last year, if he can protect the basketball, not turn the ball over, get Mara easy looks, get Johnson easy looks, let Lindeborg be the star of this team, really the sky's the limit. So, I mean, just looking at the odds, too, I know you and I look at this stuff just for fun. They were like plus 3,500 to win the national championship. After Feast Week, it's like plus 1,600, and it's trending down. So, I mean, even the odds makers in Las Vegas were impressed with what they saw from Michigan.
Yeah, they were spectacular, particularly the Gonzaga game. I mean, look, they played well against everybody. They beat San Diego State soundly. They beat Auburn soundly. But the Gonzaga game was one that really, blew my hair back, because I watched Gonzaga in their previous two games too, and they were easily the better team against Alabama and handled all the stuff that Alabama, that's such a challenge for them with their length on the wing and their defensive speed and size and their perimeter shooting, and then obviously EK and Huff. That's the best. That coming into the game, like, that's the best front court in the country to me.
Mm-hmm.
Two guys who can score at two different levels and play off each other so well. And other than a few Huff floaters here and there in the first half, when Gonzaga had nothing else to offer against them offensively, they couldn't do anything against that front court. And Morrow was immense. I mean, this would be like Morez, Johnson, and Lindeborg would be an awesome front court in and of themselves. And you throw Mara on top and the way he played in Vegas, and it's just terrifying. And Ek, who again I would put as one half of, coming into the game, would have put as one half of the best front court in the country, ended up with what, 1 point? I mean, he barely, he didn't impact the game at all. He just couldn't do anything. And so that was like the real wake up call of just like, I think Gonzaga is really good. I came in thinking Gonzaga was really good.
I still think they're really good.
I still think they're really good. And then
right.
they're just, Michigan's front court just looks like it's on a different level defensively. And then, you add in better stuff offensively, a little bit more cohesion. Obviously making threes is a huge deal. And that's where they fell down a little bit. And the turnovers obviously didn't help a little bit earlier in the season when they weren't playing like this. But if this is the version of Michigan you get, they are, like I said, not just that's the favorite to win the Big Ten. That's like not only a number one seed, where do we start looking at this team? Could they be, 23-24 UConn? Like, it's early, but that was the kind of performance that we got out of them. So I think they came out of Feast Week with the most credit in the bank relative to what we thought of them going in. Really impressive performance, and you could see the pieces really, really coming together for Dusty May. Kansas is my next nomination for a stock rising. I stand corrected on Kansas. I was very down on Kansas coming into the week. Very sort of like, I watched them play. I watched Melvin Council do one good thing and two insanely frustrating things. Obviously, we talked about their front court last week. And the problems they present. Flory Badunga has made the leap, it seems to me now. Tiller is very useful playing off of him, given that Badunga needs to kind of be around the rim. And they're getting enough stuff from Trey Wright et al. To play well without Darren Peterson. Like, I thought it was kind of a classic Bill Self masterclass type of week, particularly in the Tennessee game. And you have to give credit where it's due. It was too early to be out on Kansas.
Absolutely. And we mentioned their front court kind of gelling together. I think we've seen them really kind of come into their own. And I do think the real takeaway for me for Kansas, and it's like kind of an elementary take, but it looks like they like each other, right? I mean, it looks like they enjoy playing with each other. And even after the game, when they're doing the post-game press conference and they're all there and they're doing the Oklahoma City Thunder, like we're all doing the post-game together, and Bill Self is kind of in the middle of the chaos. It was a sweet moment where you're just like, okay, this team was supposed to be the Darren Peterson show, but there's a lot of talent in this group, and it seems like they have found a way without Peterson to kind of galvanize as a group. Now, the real question will be when they introduce Peterson back into this group, can he fit right back in? I assume that he will because he's that talented. And if he does, that changes the whole ceiling of Kansas as well, because it's like these guys got better without him. They kind of developed their roles, especially Trey White. I think Trey White has been, obviously we talked about the front court, but I think Trey White has just been a great, X factor for this team, kind of does all the little things. I think the maturation of him as a person and as a player, you can see that on the court. So, I mean, that's really encouraging. He's a McDonald's All-American, so it's not like he's not a talented player, but I feel like he was trying to always be like, I'm going to be the star of the team kind of mentality. And it felt like over the past couple of weeks, he has kind of defined himself as this, electric role player, a swing player, whatever you want to call him, whatever term you want to use for Trey White. But I feel like that's a real big piece. And also to be able to match the toughness in some of these games as well, and to figure out how to win games ugly. Like, these are all things that are signs of a really good team. And I feel like Bill Self really likes this group, like he's having fun. And, when someone who has the coaching acumen of Bill Self is having a good time and really likes his team and also has the potential number one pick coming back, I think the stock is definitely rising.
Yeah. I mean, offensively, their numbers don't look much better than they did last year, but they did against Tennessee. And
which is a tough team to do it against.
I think technically they look better than they did offensively in many ways. Obviously, even without Peterson, Dickinson is the best, like, most reliable offensive player of these teams in the last 2 years, whatever. But they have more shooting. They have bigs with more versatility. And, they have a big in Badunga who can go down and post now and can get you reliable post buckets, but is also happy playing off screens, getting to the middle of the lane and doing simple stuff, rebounding on the offensive end and just being a constant menace. So yeah, the balance is,
and he's better
there.
Passing the ball than Dickinson. No offense, like Dickinson
that
had
was
this
what blew me
proclivity to
away.
get doubled and not, kind of get his head down and get trapped almost. It felt like Badunga, when they come for the double, he knows the spacing is so much better, it looks like, with that group.
Yeah, we talked about about him doing that against the Notre Dame, in the Notre Dame game, on Tuesday of last week, or was it Monday? I don't remember, but
it was Monday.
We
but
definitely, we talked about it. And yeah, that was a real eye opener for sure, because you did not associate Badunga with any of that kind of stuff last year of catching double teams, reading it, swinging the ball out, and he did all of that stuff extremely well all week. So we'll talk Kansas a little bit more when we preview. They have a massive game against UConn coming up, as you're hearing this tonight, Tuesday night. But a great week for them. Great week for USC. Chad Baker-Mazara did his Chad Baker-Mazara thing one time in Maui. He did like a finger guns gesture after making a three. Got teed up for that. So they sprinkled a little of that in and still won the Maui Invitational anyway. I'd say all in all a successful week.
Absolutely. It does feel like Maui. I mean, even the polls, we always joked about the Maui bump. It does feel like a little bit of a Maui boost. Maybe not a full-on bump at this point, but they get into the polls. They do get respect for winning that tournament, and I do feel like they survived, throughout that tournament, because there were some moments where even in their first game, it was like, oh, man, here it comes. USC is going to have some issues here, but they were able to find a way to win, and it did feel like Chad Baker-Mazara is the leader of this team, and now that's a scary proposition sometimes, but again, he is a very talented player. He's now the first player to win 2 multiple Maui Invitationals, which I think kind of is the sign of the times in college basketball, that we have a guy who's been able to win multiple Maui Invitationals. Chad Baker-Mazara kind of feels like the perfect poster boy for that situation. But again, looking at Maui, the 5th, 6th place game felt like it was supposed to be the championship game, but it was totally an unexpected tournament. That's sort of the beauty of the Maui Invitational. You get in the Lahaina Civic Center, everything seems a little bit different, a little bit off. And the last time that Eric Musselman was in that building, I know you remember this team, and he absolutely cratered. I mean, he was yelling at the officials. There was some rumblings he might get blackballed from the event. So, like, for him to go from where he was, he kind of had a Hurley moment before Hurley.
Yeah, I was going to say, he did a Hurley. Yeah, he did a pretty Hurley.
Yeah, it was the first Hurley, but with much less coverage and camera angles. But for him to come back in that event to do things differently, he said that he did a good job of kind of letting his guys have some more fun in Maui, which helped them sort of gel together. And obviously they have a lot of talent at USC, so for them to be ranked in the AP, to get some credit out there after that win, I think that's very encouraging. And again, Chad Baker-Mazar, talking about experience, I mean, he's got more experience than anybody in the country on a top flight program. So that's something that's nice to have in your back pocket. Again, the gun. The shooting the guns, all that sort of stuff with your fingers, that's not great. But that's sort of the Chad Baker-Mazar experience, as we all know. So, I mean, it comes with the good. There is a little bit of chaos in between, but for them to go out there and get that win those 3 games, that's really encouraging. And I feel like that might be more of a blip than a bomb. I don't know about USC winning the Big Ten potentially, but I do think they're a really good team and they're going to have a good season. And I think Eric Musselman is sort of building his identity out there at USC right now.
For sure. One of the teams that USC had to beat on the way to their Maui Invitational title was Seton Hall. And I think we can now, I don't know about crowning Seton Hall, but if you want to look at, we'll talk about them in more detail, but, the Big East has 4 teams in the top 50 of the first net rankings. Seton Hall is one of them, and they're at 50. And considering where they started around the hundreds or top, mid 90s in KenPom to start the season. That was a pretty common projection, I think, for them coming off the season they had last year. The performance they put up in Maui, the defense they played, the way they kind of took NC State off the floor and early in that game and carried it through the entire 40. And then, finishing up against Washington State after losing a heartbreaker against USC in the semifinal. It was a really impressive week and maybe a potentially pivotal week for Shaheen Holloway, who, obviously has had just an awful season last year. And I think, Seton Hall fans are kind of looking around being like, how do we feel now? You can be a little bit more positive and confident going forward here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember at Big East Media Days, they were picked to finish last in the conference, and Shaheen Holloway was pretty, I think in the nicest way possible. He just kind of responded with what any coach would, which is basically like, these guys don't know my team, and they don't know what our expectations are in our own building. And he basically, without proclaiming it and making some big proclamation, was just like, I don't think we're going to finish last in the Big East. And I kind of took that in my preseason notes. I put that down as like, let's, keep an eye on Seton Hall. Maybe Shaheen Holloway knows something that we don't know. And if you watch that Wazoo game, what you saw was that, like, they throw the first punch. You saw it against NC State as well. Like, this is a very physical team, especially defensively. They're not really afraid of anybody. Their guards get up in you. There's a lot of ball pressure, which is kind of the staples of a Shaheen Holloway team in general. And I do think that's going to translate in the Big East. It's kind of a throwback old Big East kind of team. And, looking at the net, half the conference is sub 100 right now. So it's not a very deep conference, and they're obviously struggling for identity. I mean, there's a chance, not to use a Rothstein, terminology here, a 2-bid league, worst case scenario. But if Seton Hall can shape up and be one of those teams that can get some nice wins in conference, I think that, you're looking at a team that could potentially make the tournament, which would be really good for the Big East and obviously really good for Seton Hall fans who, they deserve it. Those are some diehard. I know a few Seton Hall fans in my life, and they love basketball, and they especially love Big East basketball. And this is a team that sort of fits their identity and definitely fits Shaheen Holloway's identity as well.
For sure. When he answered that question at Big East Media Day, maybe he was just like, I mean, come on, have you seen DePaul? Like,
I think he was like, are you guys kidding me right now?
Give us a break over here. Have you seen Xavier? Anyway,
even Rick Pitino said Xavier. He was like, yeah, they're gonna have a tough year.
He may have had some insight and some late night phone calls with his son on that one. Before the rest of us knew. Richard was at practice like, oh God, it's not going to be good. So Seton Hall, stock rising in a major way. Vanderbilt, we mentioned earlier, but ran through the battle for Atlantis, ran through what I think will end up being, maybe already is, a pretty good to potentially really solid to, I don't know if very good. I didn't want to go to very good, but St. Mary's team, like I like St. Mary's. It's hard to score a lot of points on them, just sort of on any given game on an annual basis for like the last 10 years of Randy Bennett's tenure. Putting up 95 on them gives you a good hint as to the kind of stuff that Mark Byington's team is running. So a really impressive week for Vanderbilt, and they're up to 10th in KenPom, which has always been high on them, even coming into the season. But they've been good. In a similar vein, Iowa. Iowa won 2 games at their MTE, beat Ole Miss in a close one. Bennett Sturts was unbelievable in that game. I have a lot of Iowa fan buddies, and obviously I've been talking about Sturts all offseason and how much they're going to love watching him play and how good he is, and sending them random statistics and stuff. But I admit I was a little bit like, I don't know about this Ole Miss game. Camerdine's awesome too. I really like this guy. He's very versatile in French, and he was doing some great stuff early in that game. And then Sturts just kind of took it over the same way he did at Drake, the same way he did in the Valley against a team that I think, despite their 0-2 week last week, will end up being pretty solid in the SEC and Ole Miss. Iowa, everything that all the smart people have been telling you about them in the offseason seems to be very true. Sturts is that good, and he's playing with not just the guys that came over from Drake last year, but some other like D1 Big Ten level talent, and the whole thing's flowing.
Yeah, I like this Vanderbilt team a lot. I mean, the biggest test they had in the battle for Atlantis was Western Kentucky in the first game, but outside of that, they basically blew the doors off everybody, especially St. Mary's in that championship game. It did feel early on maybe there's a fighting chance for St. Mary's to hang on, but I like Tyler Nickel. He's a nice piece. I watched him obviously at North Carolina back in the day, then goes to Virginia Tech, now ends up at Vanderbilt. I think he's been a nice piece for them as kind of like a third, fourth scoring option as a group. Jalen Washington has been a nice surprise for that group, and then you get Chandler Bing, a nice Friends reference in there every once in a while when he gets in and gets you some nice minutes. So, I mean, it's a fun team. I feel like Byington right now, I was thinking about Coach of the Year after Feast Week, because a lot of this is like kind of your first, pitch to the people, as far as especially the media people that are watching all these games. And it does feel like if Vanderbilt can play at this level, for them to win a tournament, I'm always a big guy. If you can win these early season tournaments, that obviously projects well when you play in a real tournament, when we're talking about the NCAA tournament. So for USC to win a tournament, for Michigan to win a tournament, for Vanderbilt to win a tournament with the Battle for Atlantis, like all three of those teams, I came away very impressed with how they were able to handle sort of the process, and obviously scouting those games so quickly. The turnaround is really tough. I feel like that's why Gonzaga was a little upset with sort of their draw. They're like, we don't even know who we're going to play. Now we're playing Michigan.
None of them did. I mean, imagine being those coaches like the night before your games the next day, and you don't know what, let alone who you're playing, so you can scout. You don't know what time you're playing, which arena you're playing. It's not easy.
That's another bad thing about the Players Era Festival. At least like with the bracket, you have an idea it's one of these two teams. When it's just like we're deciding who you're going to play and when you're going to play, you're like, all right, well, when am I doing shoot around? When am I doing this? When am I doing that? What assistant coach? Am I going to have 3 different assistants working on different games and wasting their time because we might not ever see this team again the rest of the season? Like, it was a bit of a mess.
They do it at AAU events. It was the response. It's like anyone who has coached high school or AAU knows how this is how it works. It's like, yeah, everyone who does that hates it. And like, you're also not scouting some team from California when you're at a big national AAU tournament, because you have what are you going to do? Like, look at the guys' clips on YouTube. You're not going to have a ton of film handy, at least at most levels of AAU. So yeah, that whole thing.
And you're not going to have the implications of getting blown out by 40. You know what I mean? Like, that really hurts you in the net rankings and the metrics and all this sort of stuff. So like, it's a really big deal when you have no idea what's going to come on the other side. It is also fascinating for me in basketball. It feels like the NBA pulls from college, like the in-season tournament is just basically a knockoff of the NCAA tournament, right? College is pulling now from AAU, and it's like this trickle-up sort of decision-making in basketball that just feels completely backwards, right? It should be like the NBA sets the terms, maybe college does a little bit of NBA, and then the AAU kind of feels, funnels down from college. But it's like we've completely worked it. Like, it's all reverse at this point. So if you're trying to point to AAU as like, oh, this is a good model, it's probably not a good model.
No, and any parent of anybody who plays in who has youth sports at any sort of medium to high club level where they go play at these big tournaments, whether it's soccer, which my daughter plays, or basketball or whatever, no one likes this formats. Just that's the point, is to just get games and play and get on the recruiting, whatever. The point is not like to really go win the tournament, or to build a resume for later inclusion in the thing that actually matters,
which comes down to money in the end. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of money at stake. Yeah, a
lot of money at stake. And again, the at large, we talk about it every year, but like, again, look at the Wake Forest example. These games really matter. Those Michigan Wake Forest lost to Michigan when they could have won the game in regulation and went to overtime. The Texas Tech game, these games are going to matter on Wake Forest resume throughout the rest of the season, unless they do something crazy in the ACC and win 15 games or something, right? Which could happen, but is not likely. And most likely is they're going to be either on the bubble or looking at those two games and be like, well, we would have been on the bubble if we had won those. So all
in the last few
really
years, winning 15 games in the ACC doesn't necessarily mean you're already in. You know, you might be on the bubble. So I mean,
good point.
That's the other part. Yeah.
Yep. Good point. A couple other teams I wanted to shout out. LSU. We made fun of their event, if you recall, last week, because they were with like Drake and DePaul and one other bad high major team that I can't remember off the top of my head. But they completely handled Drake and then destroyed DePaul. And I looked today, all of a sudden they're up to like 23rd in KenPom. They're above USC. Now, is that like the be all end all? Obviously, no, it's a projection ranking. Like it's just efficiency stuff. It's not like whatever, like take it for what it's worth. Maybe you think they haven't beaten anyone good and you'd be right. But based on where LSU was coming into the season and how they've performed in pretty much every game they've played so far, you know, the Drake game is their closest game. They've beaten everybody else soundly, and including a DePaul team by 33 that will go into the Big East and may knock off a team or two. And that's going to, you know, LSU has now put themselves in position to come out of Feast Week, play a couple of good non-conference games coming up. You know, they go at Boston College this week. Not a whole lot of upside there, but you know, maybe another 25
win by 40
win.
Again, you know, help the metrics.
Exactly. But then they get Texas Tech and SMU, you know, the I guess this coming weekend and the week after. So, you know, LSU could be in play for the SEC now in a way that I think most people didn't expect before the last week's games. Also want to shout out Cal, worth a mention, very quietly beat UCLA on Tuesday night last week. Everyone was paying attention to the players era. Probably not a whole lot of eyeballs on that Cal UCLA game, more of a family and friends affair. But that's a big win for a Cal program that's starting to build some momentum under Madsen. Wanted to shout out Belmont, unbeaten into the 70s now. Another mid-major team joining the ranks of Yale. Actually, I haven't checked in on Yale's progress yet. Have they lost yet? Let's look really quick. Bear with me, listeners. Yale, where are you? There they are.
I don't think so.
Oh, they did lose a game. Yep, they lost to Rhode Island. But they're 7-1. They beat a good Akron team, another mid-major joining the ranks of potential at-larges, or at least like 12, 13 seed candidates, which we, you know, as we talked about, what looked a little dicey before the season began. So, you know, love to those teams. And then one last a big winner of Feast Week that I have to mention is the member of the Trilly Discord server. I believe his name is, or her name, not don't want to misgender, is a Wildcat in the Cradle. Made a bet with another member before the season started that Houston would finish outside the top 25 in adjusted efficiency this season. And I caught wind of this conversation just as I was kind of scrolling through one night, and I was like, buddy, they haven't finished outside the top 15 since like 2019. I wish you the best of luck here, but I can't go along with you with this. They're 32nd right now, and I'm getting updates about this on a semi-regular basis. The wager is looking quite strong so far, and you know, will it hold? I don't know, but the events of the last week have certainly burnished that Trilly Discord members' bet. So I just wanted to, you know, maybe it'll turn around and they'll finish 12th or whatever, and I'll look smart again. But right now, I've been bested.
Yeah, it does feel like Houston has and it might be by design, and Kelvin Sampson is a little bit of a mastermind, as we both know. So, I mean, last year they start 4-3. Everybody kind of writes them off and says, oh, this team they don't have the firepower that they did last year, and yada, yada, yada. They're not going to do anything. They make the national championship game. So we can put a little bit of, a pause, maybe an understanding of kind of what this Houston team will be. I still do believe that they will, be obviously a contender in the Big 12, and I think they'll be in contender to potentially make a Final Four, and who knows, maybe even do more than that just because of the talent that they have. But I like that, someone has already circled them and is already using the metrics against them. So shout out to the Trilly Discord. I mean, these guys, they're locked in. So guys and gals, yeah.
They're all over it. And he said it was the easiest board bet of the offseason. And I was just like, okay, if you say so. And so far it's looking pretty good. If he had an actual wager on that, it might be a good time to cash out, or maybe it'll keep looking more and more More and more prescient. Okay, let's do some stock fallings real quick. I had Gonzaga on here, but we kind of talked about it. Maybe we just think Michigan is so good that it was like an intra week stock rising, stock falling situation with Gonzaga, because I was so high on them even coming into the Michigan game, and then seeing them against that front court, I was kind of like, there's a ceiling there. I'm going to skip them and just go straight to Georgetown.
They were on my list as well. Yeah,
the first net rankings are out. They're 122nd. That is not the end of the world. We'll talk a little bit more about the net and point out some interesting teams up and down that list that came out on Monday from the NCAA. It's very early for that, but we have talked about Georgetown in the past being one of the hopes for the Big East this season, and certainly a hope for their own fans after God knows how many seasons out of the tournament, except for the, if you want to count the Patrick Ewing random Big East tournament win.
2021. What a year.
It still counts. Put it on the board, but it wasn't earned in an at-large fashion because of the quality of the whole campaign. And they started well, got the win over Clemson at home, playing some good defense. Now, Vince Iwuchukwu is a big part of this, right? He has been missing for the last week or so for it's undisclosed, scheduled medical procedure. He should miss 6 to 8 weeks. He's a big part of what they were doing on defense, coming in off the bench and just sealing things up at the front of the rim. They're going to miss him, but there's going to be a lot of games that they're going to miss him for. And so you sort of look at Georgetown now after the week they just had and where their numbers are, their net and their efficiency numbers across metrics, and start to think maybe the optimism of a few weeks ago was a little premature.
Yeah, the Dayton game was the game to me that it was right there for the taking. Goes to overtime. Was a really good game. Honestly, I came away impressed with both teams at some level. Definitely Dayton. I like Latong a lot, and I feel like that goes back to what you were talking about with sort of the front court not being able to match. I think he ended up with 18 in that game, somewhere around there. Had a really good performance for Dayton. Javon Bennett, obviously their star player, had some big shots. Hit a big three late in that game in overtime to kind of get them over the hump, and they had a look. I mean, Malik Mack, it was a missed free throw that goes all the way around the rim and comes out. Malik Mack comes down, has a step back three that would have tied the game to send it to double overtime. It goes all the way down, doesn't go in, and rims out. And then, we go to free throws, they end up losing that game by 5. So that game felt like a kind of a turning point moment where if they were able to survive against Dayton, they kind of hold, a little bit, and then maybe they can survive this run. They got a big opportunity coming up this next week, Sunday against North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So maybe that's a chance for them to get like a resume boosting win potentially, because the guards that they have on that team, like I said, Malik Mack, KJ Lewis has been really good for them. Obviously, Arizona transfer. We like KJ last year at Arizona. So they have the backcourt, I think, to compete and contend with a lot of teams. So right now they're trying to find their footing in the front court. But yeah, we were very excited about what we saw early on. The early returns on Georgetown were high. The stock is falling and dipping a little bit, but I do think, I have some faith that, Cooley will figure it out. And I wouldn't be shocked if Sunday they give Carolina a real run for their money.
Yeah. Their win against Maryland at Maryland by 10 is a good reminder of why it pays to hold your fire a little bit early in the season, because it turns out Maryland might just be kind of bad, which is not, it's
a lot of new players trying to fit everybody,
rebuilding. Yeah. Buzz is kind of figuring out his post Texas A&M system of maybe slightly less extreme focus on we're going to offensive rebound everything, and it doesn't matter if we miss a gazillion shots a game. It's not shocking that Maryland's bad, but I don't think people expected them to maybe be at the level they're at right now coming into the year. So that win maybe doesn't look quite as good in retrospect. On the other hand, they went basically even with Dayton, and Dayton went more or less even with a good BYU team, the following night. So there's something to take away from
really
there,
had the chance for a big upset there. Dayton
did. And if you're looking at your Georgetown, you're sitting there, before or after the Miami game, I can't remember which one was first or not, on that Friday. Thanksgiving weekend kind of blurs together for a variety of reasons. But obviously they had a disappointment.
It's the tryptophan and the turkey. We're all hindered by it.
Let's call it that. And they lost to Miami, which is disappointing in and of itself, but maybe you think Dayton, upsets BYU and it helps you through the transitive metrics over time. not so much. But we'll see how it goes for Georgetown. All hope is not lost, but it's a little bit of a come down from where they were early on. The same is true of Ole Miss. You know, I mentioned them in my little Iowa shout out quickly. I like this Ole Miss team. I continue to like them. I think they'll be good, but their week was a disappointment, and their defense, which was, you know, has been a recurring issue under Chris Beard there for, I think, generally mostly personnel reasons. You know, they were much better last year on that end of the floor. They were really bad his first year when they kind of flirted with the bubble and didn't quite end up getting there. Their defense, against Iowa, okay, it's Iowa. They have one of, if not the best guards in the country in Bennett Sturts. It's really hard to stop him. Okay. The guy's hitting 25-foot threes, pulling up off a dribble. What are you going to do? But against Utah, a team that no one expects to be very good this year, they gave up 74 points in 75 points in 65 trips, which is not going to get the job done. Doesn't really matter how good AJ Storr is, how good Ilias Kamerdine is. They're just going to have to guard better.
Yeah, and Chris Beard, I did feel like, you know, this was we talked about that game coming up on Tuesday on last week's show. We kind of circled that game as like a litmus test of this team to kind of see where they are and their level as a group. We were excited about where they are. I think they'll still get better as the season goes on. But yeah, you're right. I mean, defensively, that's really going to be, you know, the interesting situation. And also the SEC just isn't as good. I mean, how could it be as good as it was last year? So you might not have as many opportunities in the conference to, you know, go 9-9 or whatever the number is and still be in as an at-large bid. So, I mean, you're going to have to win some games against some of those top flight programs. And as Alabama has, you know, they have their gauntlet of a schedule. They're trying to survive as best they can, right? Some of these teams, Auburn has been, you know, kind of up and down. You know, we've seen the good version of Auburn against the St. John's. We've seen the really bad version of Auburn. So, you know, trying to figure out and sift through the SEC and kind of where those teams all fall is going to be fascinating too. But I do like the talent of Ole Miss. Like you said, Storr is a guy who can be a star, and that's obvious. We all know that. We all know his game at this point. But not the best week for the Rebels when it comes down to the basketball and obviously losing Lane Kiffin. So we feel for Ole Miss right now.
It's tough. It's tough. Been a tough week for everyone in Oxford.
Not a happy Thanksgiving. Yeah.
No, not at all. A lot of family drama going on.
Yeah. A lot of driving to the airport and booing your former coach. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, if you're doing that, I don't know. Maybe
that's a different level. Yeah. They're like Charlie Weiss is getting on the plane. Boo.
I'm too lazy for that. I love the passion.
It just means more even. Yeah, maybe that's why you and I, ACC Big Ten brains, we cannot comprehend that level of dedication, but I do respect it at some level. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just a weather thing. Hey, might as well get outside anyway. Another team, Cincinnati, lost at home to Eastern Michigan. We were excited about their defense after the Louisville game, even if they didn't finish that off. Struggle shooting in that game. Boy, did they struggle against Eastern Michigan. 56 points, 66 trips, 7 of 29 from 3, 12 of 27 from 2. It's, you know, this is the potential. You know, they have the tools to be like a top 10 defensive team, and they might not be able to score the basketball at all. So I'm a little concerned about Cincinnati. And then another team that this feels a little bit like cheating, because I think their stock honestly probably rose a little bit from where they were before coming in, but they still ended up kind of one of the biggest losers of the week in some ways, is Syracuse. And again, we talked about them after the Houston game last week, a game that they very easily could have won, and that would have been obviously massive. And then they played a tough game against Kansas, lost by 11. You know, a tight game. It looked like they belonged on the floor with a Kansas team that ended up going on and beating Tennessee the next night. And then they get Iowa State, and Iowa State, you know, can get a slight stock falling for that unfortunate turn of events as well. Although Iowa State beat them by 30 points, 29. And Syracuse, all of a sudden, it's like, did they gain anything from there from an otherwise, like, you played well, but you got nothing out of it. And you're kind of back where you started at the beginning of the week, having beaten no one good and progressively played worse and worse as the week went on.
Yeah, you go 0-3 at the Players Era Festival, and the good vibes that we had when we started the show last week, where we're talking about the positives to take away from Syracuse and the fact that they took Houston to the brink, they take that team to overtime. Now it's a totally different conversation where you're saying to yourselves, what is this team? Is there any sort of light at the end of the tunnel? Obviously, you have a hot seat situation there with Red Austrie. As much as I like Red, I think Red's one of the nicest guys in basketball. But again, there are no moral victories in this game. And for Syracuse, you leave that tournament with a bad taste in your mouth because you had an opportunity to really get a signature win for the program, for the new era of Syracuse basketball. And then you see Tennessee the next day knock them off, right? And you're just like, that should have been us. Like, we should have had that game where, we get the positive vibes of knocking off a really good Houston team. So I think for that, it's a really damning situation, sort of because I really thought Syracuse was going to be a player in the ACC, maybe top 7, who knows if things break their way, top 5, but it feels like it could go sideways a little bit. But I do like the talent of that team, just in general. So 0-3 does not look good for anybody. Another ACC team I wanted to throw out, just as we're talking about the fallers, we have to talk about the Red Reckoning, because Will Wade, NC State, this was supposed to be a shoe-in for them to go to Maui. I mean, this is pre-tournament, had a lot of NC State friends, have some NC State family that, made the trip out there to Maui. They were, taking pictures of the Wayne Duke trophy, sending it like, this is ours in a few days. You know what I mean? It was a lot of, dare I say, confidence in the Will Wade reckoning that was on their way. And then obviously Shaheen Holloway, Seton Hall knocks him off. And then in the last game against Texas, that's another opportunity where we're talking about resume building, and they lose that game to Texas and to Sean Miller. So those were 2 losses that really changed the trajectory of this NC State team, that they come into the week ranked number 23. There's all positive vibes. People are talking about them as potentially a dark horse to win the ACC. And I feel like that conversation has completely fallen off after Feast Week, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think NC State, one of the big stock fallings, and defensively, it looks like a bit of a mess right now. Seton Hall is no one's idea of an elite offensive team, even given how they played, and that was a bad defensive performance, and the Texas defensive performance was a complete shambles. Like
102 points.
Texas got hot from 3. That's fine. It happens sometimes, but it doesn't explain.
Pope couldn't miss. Yeah, he was like 5 for 5 to start.
Yeah. I mean, they shot 50% from 3 in that game on 32 attempts. So you're going to get, you're probably going to lose that game. But the number of easy baskets they got and the lack of resistance from NC State on rotations was alarming. And there's a lot to figure out there. And when you're leaving an MTV with apologies from a player and a coach talking about how much they let the team, let the fans down, and all the people who spent a bunch of money to come to Hawaii and were so excited before the tournament began. It's not been a successful week by any stretch of the imagination. Another ACC team, I just want to mention quickly, because we talked about them last week, Notre Dame, had 2. They played Rutgers and barely won that game, which is damning in and of itself. Kansas, Houston, close enough games, but can't get over the hump, and feels like a kind of a metaphor for this era of Notre Dame right now, where you keep looking at their roster, you keep looking at Marcus Burton, you keep looking at the guys they add, and what should be a good shooting team and a versatile team, and so on and so forth. And they're just kind of continually mid, and it's a little bit of a bummer, because I really enjoy watching Marcus Burton play, and I would like to see him have a relevant season in college basketball. And it seems like that's already slipping away a little bit. Rutgers, speaking of which, I think a big loser from this season, because obviously that's a team that was outclassed by everybody at that competition, right? Okay, fine. But they, other than a slightly okay performance against Notre Dame, they just bombed out of that thing. And, they were coming off a home loss to Central Connecticut, and you're looking at Rutgers now with a wider view, and like, this is not the Rutgers of the Steve Peichel era that we became accustomed to. And he made the big bet last year on the 2 lottery picks and went all in, and it didn't work out. And you just sort of wonder if that was like the big last push at something different. And that classic, like, defensive identity, even if we can't score, we're one of the best defensive teams in the country, was just, like you have said a couple of times, more of a blip historically than a repeatable thing for Peichel over multiple years. And that's going to be, if you're a Rutgers fan, you think you found something there that was sustainable over time, and it was for a few years. And now if you're looking at getting in the coaching carousel with him, that's not an easy place to win. And so you're entering a real era of uncertainty.
And you got Purdue coming up, which for whatever reason, Purdue has a tough time going to play at Rutgers. So if I'm Steve Peichel, I'm just crunching the tape, and I'm like, how do we? I mean, obviously that's a big and tall task, especially with a guy that's 7'4" and Jacobson. But if they can get any sort of sliver of hope, that would be the game. For whatever reason, Purdue has been snake bitten traveling up to New Jersey, so maybe that's a way for them to get back on track, and that would be the positive spin. I'm trying to be positive for Steve Peichel because I'm such a big fan of him, but it goes back to what you said. I think they tried to push through to the upper echelon by having those two guys come into the program, but I think in that whole process, they lost the identity of what got them into the echelon that they were in, and then unfortunately, instead of pushing through, they got knocked back down another peg, and that's concerning, obviously, but Peichel's a really good coach, and I hope that they can kind of find their footing again, because it just doesn't look like the versions of Rutgers that we saw 2-3 years prior, when he was getting things cooking there.
Yeah, and after the Purdue game, they go to Michigan, so
two opportunities
for that one. Oh yeah, well, yeah, that's one way to look at it.
I told you I'm spinning it positive. Two great.
That is one way to look at a trip to Ann Arbor after Feast Week is an opportunity for sure. Okay, any other stock fallings that you want to bring up? I'm kind of tapped out. I thought about Virginia Tech, but I want to leave Virginia Tech alone right now. You got anybody else you that came to mind?
Ohio State with the Pitt buzzer beater. For that to happen back-to-back years just feels like some sort of cruel deja vu from the basketball gods. I mean, I even had to do, when he hit the buzzer beater, I had to do this weird, like, did I dream this? Was this like a weird premonition that I had in the past? Or no, that happened in exactly like that last year. So that was a very strange thing. I think Ohio State is a good team, obviously, with really good guard play. But that game is going to be something that I think is going to hurt them when we talk about resumes in the future. We don't want to get too into the bubble talk, but that could be a really quote unquote bad loss in the future for them. And then the other team I just wanted to get your thoughts on again, and I think maybe this will become like a recurring segment. What do we do with St. John's? I mean, I'm perplexed by St. John's. Again, preseason top 5. Rick Pitino's, tweeting about if he was coaching a number 1 seed and he left for another job in the middle of March. He's like doing scenarios and hypotheticals on Twitter. It just feels like this team is still lacking to find a defensive identity, especially, and they have a lot of talent. So as I watched them play Auburn, I just kept thinking to myself, this is just not the St. John's team I thought that they would be. You were kind of on the corner of you're not sure this team would be as good as the expectations were. So, like, getting a temperature check, I mean, I think the stock was already falling, but, I mean, it might be really in free fall at this point.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Iowa State game was close. That's a good Iowa State team. Lipsy was healthy for the vast majority of that game. There's credit in a 1-point loss to Iowa State, right? And then they played okay against Baylor, particularly offensively. The most confusing thing to me about this team, still, and I think we talked about this after the Alabama game, and after that loss, is like they're putting points on the board, and I was worried about them offensively because I looked at clearly Pitino swerved a bit after last season and said, I got to get some more shooting, at least on the perimeter, even if I don't have a bunch of stretch 4 guys who are going to stand in the corner and hit threes, and we're going to be our usual sort of robust, big physical front court with Mitchell and Zuby and the rest of these guys. And what they're doing is being extremely effective on the offensive end for the most part. I mean, even in the Auburn game, they were over a point per possession. They weren't electric on the offensive end, but they played fine on that end. They're just getting crushed going the other way.
Which is anti-Pitino, right? I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
And even in the Baylor game, I mean, Baylor's got some offensive talent. They played, pretty well in Vegas, but, they in a 15-point win when you're up for most of the second half, maybe you let some of the standards slip a little bit. But again, Baylor put up a good offensive showing against them. Iowa State certainly did. And Auburn had 85 points and 67 trips. And that's the confusing thing about them to me, because I looked at the personnel coming in. I thought, well, guard play is a question. Point guard play and offensive flow is a question. And they sort of seem like they get the ball and go play and go score. And that's not really an issue. They get the ball out of the rim a lot and out of the net a lot. And that is something I did not expect to see from from a Rick Pitino team, particularly one with Mitchell on it, who and Hopkins too, who just feel like tailor-made defensive for hybrid wing type guys.
It's really the
for how he wants
guards
to play.
I mean, Pettiford crushed them. Hall crushed them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, and I don't really, I mean, Ian Jackson has always kind of been a turnstile at some level defensively, so he's not going to be the answer. Sellers is kind of playing out of position against quicker guards at the one, you know? So I don't really know. Darling is outmatched athletically when he, you know what I mean? So it's like the backcourt defensively feels like a problem. Similar to Florida. Florida has the same problem as well defensively in the backcourt.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, and it's easy to overlook that stuff because you sort of get into the weeds with like, oh, they've got these switchable bigs and they can, you know, cover different guys and switch into the post and front the post and do all this different stuff. But if you get beat one-on-one out top, your defense is kind of cooked, regardless of how athletically gifted your 3 and your 4 and your 5 are. So,
and Zuby is undersized at a 5. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't have great ball pressure from your guards on the perimeter. And then on the back end, you don't have a situation like Florida does where you have monsters on the back end. You know, it's like you got Zuby who's like trying to hold, you know, his position as well. And then Mitchell, yes, he is switchable, but he's also, you know, it's basically a one-man band on defense right now. He's like Swiss Beats on defense. So to me, I'm really perplexed, like I said, with St. John's right now, and I'm trying to figure out how they remedy the situation, and it doesn't help that Rick Pitino is like tweeting through it. So I hope that they have some film to break down and they figure out some of the rotations a little bit better.
Yeah. Today he posted, Monday, he posted, in 1987, my Providence team, along with UNLV, led the nation in three-point shooting, making 7 out of 20. This year, we're making just over 7 in 22 attempts. This will not get it done. We are watching Xavier film tonight. I don't. Yeah.
Is he doing that for Richard? Like, what's going on? Yeah.
I'm not sure.
He should be watching his own film defensively, which feels like a Rick staple. I last year he was like, I want to jump in the East River. You know, like I need more of those quotes from Rick Pitino. You know what I mean?
And again, they're you know, I don't see their 3-point shooting as a significant problem. Like they're scoring the ball fine against good teams with good defenses. Like Iowa State is a very good defensive team. They did not have a problem scoring. They could not get a stop on the other end. So it's a confusing deal. They were confusing coming into the season a little bit in terms of like the personnel build. And I talked about that a lot in the offseason. And they're confusing now for different reasons. But the larger takeaway still is that it doesn't feel like things have really gelled there. And it's still not totally certain whether it's the inverse of what I thought it was going to be at the start of the year. Still not totally certain how everything is going to work together in a way that the parts are bigger than the sum of the parts are bigger than the whole. So yeah, we'll see how. The whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. I got there in the end. Yeah. Anyway, confusing. St. John's confusing. That's
I was gonna say that kind of sums it up perfectly. Like no, we don't even know what to say about this team right now. We're all
the sum is the whole is the parts. Is basically your takeaway on St. John. So. Yeah, it wasn't a great week for them. It wasn't a great week for some of our other stock fallings. I'm sure there's more we could have mentioned, but we do want to talk a little bit about the new net numbers. They just came out on Monday. This is an exciting time for me, obviously, as you know, Tate, as a certified bubble boy myself. I always look at these, and it's fun for me in some ways because they're so early in the process with such a small sample size, and because of the way the net works in many ways, it's not a predictive metric. It's kind of a jumble of different stuff. You don't have to take them as seriously as you would take a Ken Pom or a Torovic or Evan Miyakawa, who, you know, these guys put in a bunch of preseason weights based on past performance at the program and the coach and the talent and all kinds of the recruiting rankings, all kinds of stuff, right? So the net doesn't really do that. It just evaluates how you've performed with a much smaller sample set. But it is interesting, you know, Michigan's first. That's good. You know, that's accurate to me. Duke, Purdue, Vanderbilt up top at 4, which will get the Vanderbilt fans excited. If you're one of these teams, you're happy with where you are. I mean, I think the big, example here is Indiana, because there were past Indiana teams under Mike Woodson who would come into the first net rankings around this time of the year in December, and maybe they'd be, 6-1 or 7-0 or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if Woodson ever totally got this, but being 7-0 when you've beaten a bunch of bye teams by 7 points at home is not super helpful. Like the wins are on the board, but it's not the NBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to rack some numbers up here. And so Indiana, would come into these, and Indiana fans will be like, wait, what? We're 85th or we're 95th? What gives? And it's just like, well, yeah, a lot of these teams that you're beating by 10, 12, 7, 15 points are getting beat by 35, 40 by the teams closer to the top of the net. Indiana comes in this year at 11th. And again, it's not the be all end all, but you want to be higher up as early as you can, and you want to not avoid being super low. And again, not a death sentence for any of those teams. But it is kind of interesting as a table setter for as we get into deeper into the the meat of this season, and when the net really starts to like mean stuff.
Yeah, we always need like a bigger sample size, but again, 2018, 2019, which, man, would I give money to go back to 2018, 2019 college basketball. What a great year. But that was the first year of the net. Virginia obviously wins the national championship. Their debut in the net, their rank in the net debut. There you go. I got it together. They were number 2. Baylor was number 2 in 2021 or 2020-2021. Kansas was 14 in 21-22. UConn was number 2 in 22-23. UConn was number 9 in 23-24. Florida was number 6 last year. So just looking at that sample size, since the net came out, you have to be at worst number 14 in the net, quote unquote, to be in a championship conversation. So if you look at the top 14, Alabama sitting there at number 14. Then you got BYU, Tennessee, Indiana, like you mentioned, Michigan State, Louisville, UConn, Iowa State, Arizona, Gonzaga, Vanderbilt, Purdue, Duke, Michigan. So I wanted to ask you, is there a team that's not in that group of the top 14 that you think could be a new outlier that could win the national championship? Because there are a few that I see that I like. Kansas, to me, definitely, if Peterson comes back, could be in that conversation. They could sort of buck the trend as they did back in 2022. Houston's at number 18, so that could be a team as well as in the mix. Illinois, number 24, could be a team that's in the mix. So is there any team that stands out to you that's outside of that group?
Yeah, scanning the list, those would have been mine. I mean, I guess I'm kind of
Kentucky at 15. They're right there on the line.
Yeah, Kentucky's close enough to, maybe you kind of count them in there. Florida at 33 is probably the one that jumps out to me among the rest of that you listed. I don't think Florida is a national title team anymore. But if they figure things out in the backcourt, we've talked about this, 2-3 times in the past couple of weeks already. There's certainly the horses there to go. It's just, Fland and Lee have not lived up to what they had there last year by any stretch of the imagination. They've really suffered for it in a variety of categories. That's probably the one that sticks out to me. I mean, look, there's some teams up here that are pretty high up that, again, we mentioned LSU earlier. They're 19th. Butler, which has started off really well, 21st. That's great for the Big East, and Butler's kind of cooking right now. Yale, my mid-major team of the early season, 25th. You got Tulsa, Nebraska up there. Santa Clara, 32nd. That's big for our guy Herb Sendek. So, there's some. It's good to be up this high. I would caution any fans from getting, again, too excited or doomy about any of this stuff. I actually do have a list. I want to give credit to the person, the account that tweeted it, at Made for March. Came across this on Monday. Lowest ranked teams in the season opening net rankings to receive an NCAA tournament at-large bid. 2021 Rutgers, 217th. 21 Notre Dame, 157th. USC, 22, 146th. 22 Providence, 145th. There's a bunch more of teams from the past, 5-6 years. Not quite so many from the last couple of years, which makes you think there's some, maybe been some tweaks to the formula that prevent these kind of wild swings. 2023 Boise State is the most recent team and the only team past 2022. But the point kind of stands if you're a Georgetown fan and you're looking at your team and you're 122nd in the net right now. It's not great, but you can play your way out of that. You still have a bunch of non-conference stuff. And if you hold the line, you have a chance in your conference to put together a really nice campaign and, build yourself back up. to where.
And luckily, it's not the end all be all. Luckily they've
No.
taken in Torvik and some of the. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah,
a lot
and wins
that
above
builds up
bubble
there.
has become
right.
a major factor in the way the committee does things now. Probably smartly so, because it's sort of a resume metric, and it gives you a nice comparison. And I think the NCAA is sensitive to the idea that, oh, well, this team's net is just good because they beat Mississippi Valley State by 55. I don't really think that's ever been the case, as we've discussed, because you have to be able to beat a team by 55, and plenty of teams are not, don't have the facilities for that. Like metaphorically speaking, they may have nice gyms. They're just not good at basketball, is what I mean. But yeah, it's just interesting to look at this early in the season. It does give you a little hint of who's doing well. And it because the preseason weights are out, you do see a team like Yale up there, right? You see a team like Tulsa, and Santa Clara and Belmont, and some teams that have impressed, San Diego, UC San Diego, Akron, George Mason, McNeese, all in the top 50. GW, it's good to see in the top 50. They're off to, speaking of mid-majors, although, the A10 is kind of quasi mid-major, but, GW has had a couple losses in the
A10's
last,
so good. I love the A10.
But GW is still off to a really, really nice start to the season, and has a real crack at the NCAA tournament this season. So yeah, it's good to see some of these mid-major teams up there, because that's the kind of thing, like for Yale, they probably won't be 25th by the time we do I do the first bubble watch on Buzzer, but they might be 35th or 40th. And that gets you on the page and in the discussion and into the they don't really have the at-large wins for it, or they don't have the non-conference wins for an at-large, but maybe if they win out, then they're the kind of mid-major team the committee will take a look at. So it's good to see some of these teams up here early, even if it's, the regression is likely to hit at some point.
Another team, 22, Utah State. I love that they play at home during Feast Week. I thought that was just a great spectacle. They have a very small gym. It's like 10,000 people in their gym. Shout out to Logan, Utah. They were holding things down. Apparently, they've sold out the next 2 years season tickets there at Utah State. So something's cooking.
Incredible.
Doesn't matter who the coach is. Obviously, we saw Ryan Odom there a couple years ago. Then Sprinkle goes to Washington from there, right? They just got it. Feels like it doesn't matter who the coach is. Utah State figures out a way to win. So they're 6-0 right now, number 22 in the net. Obviously, no quad one opportunities yet for this team, but a team that could easily win their conference and could be a talking point later in the year. So it could be a big year for not Utah, the Utes basketball, but for the state of Utah, with BYU being a top 10 team, and then Utah State already in the top 25 in the net. So encouraging stuff. Utah,
big win last week over Ole Miss, and Utah State goes to South Florida on Thursday night. And that's Thursday night's games are actually, upon further review, it's a real quiet night after the conference challenge rush of tonight and Wednesday. That's the best game of the night, and that should be a really fun game. And honestly, scheduling wise, South Florida's 4-4, no real terrible losses so far. They lost to GW, Oklahoma State, VCU, Colorado State, all solid teams. Good coach with Brian Hodgson, very analytically focused coach. You go there and get a win. South Florida finishes the 80th in the net or whatever. They won't be a tournament team, but that'll look pretty good on your resume if you're Utah State. So it's that's kind of a low key, fascinating game, and one to keep an eye on Thursday, particularly on a relatively quiet night in terms of really high end games. But anyway, the big takeaway from the net: don't freak out, folks.
We got
1st,
time.
it's all good. You come back and on January 6th or whenever the New Year's festivities end for you. And if you're Georgetown and your team is still in the 120s, then you can begin your freak out. I
think Larry David said January 7th. That's the last day you can still celebrate New Year's or say Happy New Year. So that's your deadline, January 7th.
That's a classic Curb bit. Yeah, we need to have one of those on the show. Maybe we can just ask Larry if we can license one Curb bit that relates to college basketball and just play the YouTube clip over the podcast in the future. Okay, that's the net. Conference Challenge Week is here. I love this week. It gets overshadowed, I think, for some folks when you talk about, rank your best weeks in the college basketball calendar. Most people say the Feast Week is up there with some of the best weeks in March or whatever. Don't disagree. We talked about the changes to Feast Week and some people's maybe diminished enjoyment of some of those games last week, or at least the environments and the atmosphere, won't be a problem this week. Everybody's playing on campus this week. That's one of the great things about the challenges. One of the great things about the classic ACC Big Ten challenge, which has now been repurposed and sort of spread out to other conferences, as we get to see some of these high level teams play games against relatively equal competition because of the way they're scheduled out, and we get to see them play on campus. I think, leading with UConn, Kansas on Tuesday night here is just, that is a massive game and a super fun game, and I cannot wait to see Kansas. I can't wait to see Kansas. I can't wait to see UConn play at Allen Fieldhouse and try to figure it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And also Braylon Mullins coming back. They only played like 10 minutes in that game, but that's a big piece for them. Terrace Reed coming back. It's obviously a big piece for UConn. So this is the 100% version of UConn, which I think everybody has wanted to see, especially since the Arizona game, where Hurley was way too happy after that loss. I mean, I know he was still doing his like kind of prickly post game, but he was also, I think, in the back of his mind thinking to himself, man, we almost beat Arizona and we didn't even have our whole team. So I want to see kind of what the full version of UConn looks like against this Kansas team. It would be really great if Darren Peterson played. I doubt it, but stranger things have happened in college basketball. But that's a great game on Tuesday. We also have Florida, Duke on Tuesday, Carolina, Kentucky on Tuesday, Iowa, Michigan State, Big Ten play, conference play. That's the other part of this. We got the challenges, but we also have like conference games sprinkled in as well this week, which is really cool. I think that's always like kind of a shock to the system for a lot of people when they see those games. Oklahoma at Wake Forest should be a good game, and then Tennessee, Syracuse. So that's just Tuesday. By the way, like that, there's so many good games just to open up this week. Tonight, if you're listening on Tuesday, I mean, those are the games to look forward to. A lot of good ones.
Yeah, the Florida Duke game will be fascinating. I think. Look, man, I see that game going one way based on everything we've seen so far, but you never know. Yeah, like Lee and Flan get hot in Cameron and do one of the, do like the super maxed out version of like when NC State would go there and win randomly in the middle of a really good Duke season when they're going to be a number one seed or whatever. And
Virginia
maybe
Tech, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you get something special with that game, and like talent wise, it'll be super fun to watch. Even if, again, Florida has shot the ball horribly and turned it over a ton, and just looked like the guards just aren't able to function at the same level as the guys around them. But we'll see how it goes. And then we've got Louisville, Arkansas Wednesday night, leading the way in many ways, which feels like it should be Pitino Calipari. It's just like, it's a weird deal though, where like I understand that Cal's at Arkansas now, and I have that baked in. Somehow Louisville still feels like he's going to go in there like hating Louisville, even though his arch nemesis isn't there anymore. But a big game for Arkansas in particular. I think Louisville, we kind of know what they are, and we like them, and we've seen them in really good games against good teams. We've seen Arkansas play well.
Man, they had that game against Duke. I mean,
they did.
I mean, the last 4 minutes, I mean, you got to give credit to Cameron Boozer. He was great down the stretch, 35 points in 35 minutes. Obviously, we didn't even mention him when we talk about stock rising. I think that's because the stock is already so high. But yeah, that's to me, I came away impressed with Arkansas in that game. And I wouldn't be shocked if Arkansas kind of uses this opportunity to send a message to say, hey, we are a really good team. Carter Knox has not been very good for this team, which I've been a little bit shocked by. But Malik Thomas, Acuff, I mean, they got a good group of guards on that team, and I think they're getting more confidence as kind of the season goes on.
Yeah, that was the first time Cam Boozer's played extremely well against like a good high major team. Because in the Kansas game, Duke won and he was good down the stretch, but he wasn't particularly efficient, and I don't think he like popped for a lot of people. And in the Champions Classic kind of way of like, you got a lot of eyes on that, a lot of people watch it for NBA purposes, and he was just kind of okay. And against Arkansas, he was unbelievable. And you look at Duke as a team, and they don't do much wrong on either side of the ball. They're fifth in offense, fifth in defense. They shoot it well. They make a ton of easy buckets around the rim. They shoot it well from three. They can put multiple shooters on the floor at any given time to play off Boozer. They're the best team in the country in effective field goal percentage defense. They're the fifth best team in the country in 2-point defense, 17th on 3-point defense. I think that's a real thing with them. I don't think that's just teams randomly shooting badly against them. I think their length and ability to press out to 25 feet and make things, disrupt things and make things difficult for teams is real. So,
I mean, look where Malik Thomas was shooting some of those threes from. It was like 27, 30 feet out. I mean,
100%. And that's what Duke gives you. And that's, they have the athleticism and the guys to do that a lot like they did last year. And even if, again, I'm not watching this Duke team and for as good as Boozer was the other night, just aesthetically, and maybe it's just the different style of player, and maybe not having Knuppel there is a thing also. Just aesthetically watching Duke last year, I felt like every time I watched them play, it was like, oh my God, like, these guys are ridiculous. And I don't quite get that like crazy feeling watching this Duke team play, but you look
it's
at
more
them and
laborious.
You look at the results.
Yeah, but there was
but
they end up winning
business-like
the
almost.
game.
It's just kind of like just straight down the line. They're just going to beat you, and it doesn't have to look like, oh my God, this guy's the number one pick every night. They're just going to crush you. Yeah, so that'll be a fun game for the defending national champions, or maybe not quite so much a fun game, just because some of Florida's weaknesses that we've seen so far this season may be liable to show up there, particularly in Cameron.
Gongba versus Condon will be a good matchup. I'm excited for that. That's you talk about rim protection, those two guys going at it. That's going to be and Foster looked a lot better against Arkansas. I think he ended up with 8 assists in that game, so that's encouraging too, because Duke's real knock is like, who's the point guard of this team? And I feel like Foster is playing a lot better right now, facilitating a little bit more. And there was one moment in that game, one sequence where Boozer just gets the rebound and goes all the way down the court. Nobody stops the ball, and he gets like a big dunk. It was like with 4 minutes to play, and you're just like, oh yeah, he can do that too. It might not look like Cooper Flagg, but it's still effective. It still works.
Yeah. That was another one of the flaws in the not to keep harping on this, but the preseason Pitino, like, look at the point guard position is dead, and you don't need a point guard de facto anymore. Look at Duke last year, and it's like, well, do you have Cooper Flagg? Do you have Knuppel? Do you have
those are
Tyrese Proctor?
Yeah,
like,
those are 2 point guards. Yeah,
this is a different level of player you're talking about. Anyway, NC State Auburn Wednesday night, pretty interesting game given what those teams did last week. Auburn came out of the players era with more credit than I would have thought after the game against Gonzaga. It was Gonzaga, right? And
got destroyed.
And NC State has a some things to fix in pretty short order here.
It's kind of a
UCLA,
must win for both those teams, like not to put that tab this early in the season, but it feels like State, especially in that locker room, needs to win that game. And Auburn, it feels like, for just kind of to keep the Wolves at bay there, the Bruce Pearl kind of like, wait a second, Stephen Pearl is not the guy kind of audience, chirping a little bit. I think both those teams really need to win there. Yeah,
and that game, that gym is going to be hot. So it'll be a fun one to watch. Virginia at Texas, kind of an interesting game. I was going to say UCLA Washington in a Big Ten game.
Which breaks my brain.
Yeah, it breaks my brain. Indiana at Minnesota in their first Big Ten game, and then Indiana, plays Louisville on Saturday. So this is kind of,
in Indy, right? That game's in Indy.
That game's in Indy, yeah. So it's a neutral site, and that's there may be slightly more Indiana fans there, but that is kind of a true neutral site. A lot of Louisville fans will make the drive. It's not a daunting drive at all to get from Louisville to Indiana, and there's a ton of Louisville fans in Southeast Indiana too. So that'll be a fun one. But the trip to Minneapolis before that game is a little trap gamey. So something to look out for there. And yeah, Clemson at Alabama will be fun.
It's a great game last year.
Will Warren wrote this in his watch list for the site on Monday morning about like Clemson, despite having kind of all new players, just kind of looks like Clemson did last year. I think a big part of that comes down to Nick Davidson, because he fills that Clemson big guy role about as well as you could have expected in the offseason. I think most people probably expected it, but he's lived up to billing. And so Clemson is just kind of chugging along, looking relatively as good as they did a year ago. Take out the true road loss to Georgetown, and they're looking like a team that can go into a big game at Alabama and kind of get up and down with them and play with them, or at least if they don't want to get up and down with them, if they get drawn into that game, they have the ability to score the ball at a level where they can they can stay in it.
Yeah, slow the game down. RJ Godfrey back, went to Georgia for a nice little trip there last year and then came back to Clemson. We love those stories in college basketball. I like a return home. Michi Johnson has done it twice. I've never seen anything quite like that.
His is the best. He's got the best college career of like the modern era for sure.
He's just like, okay, I'm done here. I got to go back to the other home I have, which it's a nice life there. But yeah, that's a really good game. I'm excited for that. SMU at Vanderbilt. It's another one that I feel like is a little bit under the radar on Wednesday.
Yeah,
that should be a good game. And then Ryan Odom versus Sean Miller. I think you mentioned that as well. Virginia, Texas. Just those two coaches in their first SEC ACC challenge. And last year, we all remember the SEC. I think they went 14-2 right in this challenge.
Yeah.
With Duke being one of the 2 wins, so that was almost like a penciled in win anyway because of how good Duke was last year. So
yep.
The ACC needs a much better showing in this event. Let's hope that we get some more competitive games.
I think the ACC has the ability to do that this year. It's been a nice little start, with the exception of Notre Dame, which made me angry last
Boston
week, but we
College,
talked about that already. Yeah, well, Boston. Let's leave Boston College out of it.
Yeah, let's be nice.
Yeah. This weekend is also awesome, starting with Gonzaga, Kentucky Friday night. And
that's a neutral too, right?
That is in Nashville, so
yeah.
quasi-neutral. If if the Kentucky fans aren't so mad that they're not going to travel for that one, they might be a little upset right now. I don't know if they've cooled off on Mark Pope since, like, if they've given him a little bit more grace.
If they beat Carolina on Tuesday, they'll be back. Don't you worry.
Yeah, they'll come right back to it. And we didn't even mention that game, but they've got that, and then they come to Nashville to play Gonzaga team again, which completely shut down by Michigan. Looked like they wandered onto the wrong basketball court randomly. It was just crazy. But a Gonzaga team that up to that point looked very, very good and presents a lot of problems. Particularly, I think you would usually say, and they've been good offensively for sure, Gonzaga. But I'm impressed by their defense. I'm impressed by their ability to switch. I think Tyon Grant-Foster is a little bit of a cheat code defensively, and has given a lot of guys different problems to start this season. And Adam Miller's old and tough and physical, and they have a good set of wing defenders that you normally don't associate with Gonzaga teams. And I think that could give this Kentucky team some real problems because they have sputtered offensively anytime they've played a quality team.
Yeah, I like that game. I like that matchup, and I do feel like Kentucky, this is a big week for Mark Pope. Getting Carolina at home, needs to get Big Blue Nation behind him by getting a win there. I suspect that they will. I really do think this Kentucky team is a good team. But if he does lose on Tuesday, that makes Friday even more of a pressure point for him. And you don't want to go spiraling down there in the Bluegrass State, because those fans, there is no time for understanding, right? They're not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. They're going to be like, wait a second, we got rid of Calipari, especially as, let's say, Arkansas gets a big win this week. They're watching Calipari. They just watched them against Duke potentially get a win or close to getting a win. So they'll turn quickly. So Mark Pope, for his sake, he's such a good guy. I hope that he can get things righted this week. But that is going to be the big. I feel like Kentucky is kind of the biggest story of the week. Like, what do they do in these 2 games? That's going to kind of dictate what their season looks like.
No, you're 100% right. And yeah, I mean, before the season started, I think it was someone from the Lexington Herald leader in Lexington, whose name escapes me. And I may have told the story on the podcast already, but asked for like a preseason projection for Kentucky, like what constitutes a successful season. And it was like multiple choice, like SEC title, but an early exit, or Final Four is required, or a national title is required. And I was sort of like, well, okay, like, if you have a solid season, you're number 2 or 3 seed, you catch a bad break in the tournament in the Sweet 16 of the Elite Eight, I don't consider that an unsuccessful season. And I do feel like there are probably plenty of people who are Kentucky fans who are like, that is 100% an unsuccessful season. Like, that does not count as success in any way, shape, or form that we recognize as Kentucky basketball fans. And so, yeah, you don't want to get into the spiral, particularly this early, where and he kind of already has been after the Michigan State game in many ways, right? But if you come back out from that, you sort of repair against Loyola and Tennessee Tech, beat both of those teams badly, and those are very bad teams, so you should win, but they won by whatever it was, 30, 40, 50 points each, both times out. If you can bring that to a quality game in your own building against North Carolina, win that game. And then the Friday game against Gonzaga is kind of whatever. I think most people consider Gonzaga to be significantly better team than North Carolina right now at this stage, right? For as talented as Carolina is and as good as they've been so far, you can chill a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see.
But we'll see if that's capable.
Will they heed your advice? Even you're giving them wisdom. I don't know if they're going to listen.
Chilling is different. But I do think that it was so like there was no other thing to say after the Michigan State game. They were so bad, and not only were they bad, like they shot the ball poorly, they rebounded poorly, they executed the fundamentals of a basketball game poorly. They looked like they kind of hated each other, and they played like they kind of did, and they played like they didn't really care. And that is the most damning thing. And so there was no like contrarian take that any Kentucky fan who wanted to position themselves as like the voice of reason, let's chill out, let's look at this analytically, whatever. There was nothing you could say to redeem that performance. And I think that's part of why Mark Pope was so like apoplectic after it, was just like, there's nothing you can say like, oh yeah, we missed a bunch of shots and they made a bunch of shots and it's uncharacteristic for both teams. And yeah, we took a bad loss, but we think we'll be fine going forward. There was nothing. And so it really is like, you have to at least perform well and show some signs of progress moving forward here, because there is no like amelioration for how they played, particularly against Michigan State. And they weren't much better against Louisville either. So
I was going to say, I feel like they're still harboring the resentment from the Louisville game and the way that Pope, I don't even know what the right term. It was like cutesy afterwards, like he kind of like tried to be like playing coy and like tried to be like funny, or I don't even know what he was trying to do, but quoting Taylor Swift and like alluding to like a weird pregame situation that never was explained. Right. Like these people are too in the weeds.
Just trying to make a bad joke at like a funeral, and everybody's looking around being like, what are you talking about, dude? Like
this is not the time nor place. Yeah.
No, they don't think it's funny. So yeah, anyway, big week for Kentucky. I think you're 100% right. They are kind of the story of the week, and it'll go maybe one of three ways. It'll either be really bad, they'll be really happy, or it'll be somewhere in the middle where they like lose to Carolina by 2 and play well against Gonzaga and lose, and maybe some people will be able to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt, even if they don't have the wins to show for it. But it's also Kentucky, so they might just run the guy out of town anyway. We shall see. Other good games on Saturday, really quickly before we call it a podcast. I mean, we mentioned Louisville, and Indiana, in Indianapolis. Home field will be there. That's a big game, and that will be a fun downtown Indianapolis event for everybody.
Indy knows how to put on a basketball event better than anybody. Seriously,
there will be folks in various shades of red and white walking around all day downtown before that game in various stages of consciousness. So enjoy that. Iowa State Purdue, that's a top 5 game. Ken Palm on his fan match, which I'm looking at right now, to just pull up, has that the 4th best game of the day. And that's number 4 versus number 2. And I think part of that is just because Purdue's playing at home and you expect Purdue to win, right? So his algorithm is probably accounting for that. But that is an awesome game, and an Iowa State team that is kind of built in ways to give Purdue problems on both ends of the floor. So that'll be extremely fun to see. And we may get an upset, kind of borderline upset win there. We may get a performance from Purdue like we saw, the Greenbrier, wherever they beat Texas Tech, where they just hammered Texas Tech. And you're like, oh yeah, right. They are, if not the best team in the country, then one of them. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a great game. I'm just looking at Saturday's slate. I mean, you got, Ole Miss, St. John's, and MSG, which is another game where it's like Chris Beard, Rick Pitino, 2 teams that are trying to right the ship. So that's going to be a big storyline there. Illinois, Tennessee, which is also going to be in Nashville with 2 programs. That's going to be an orange out. Everybody fighting for their lives there. Auburn at Arizona as well. And then Duke at Michigan State to open up the day. I mean, yes, Feast Week was incredible and we had incredible matchups, but I mean, if you really were to break it down, I feel like this week it's a gauntlet of games. Like you really can't blink because you're going to miss something important. So everybody needs to strap in for some good basketball. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be fantastic. And, again, if you're one of those people who was not happy with the, sort of cavernous, empty gyms for the players era, even if you liked the basketball on the floor, not a problem this week. It's going to be a lot of conference stuff, and even the neutral site games are going to be places
where they love it.
Be filled up and excited, and neutrals will want to show up and watch the game, right? So it'll be a hot ticket and a lot of fun. So enjoy. That's going to do it for us for this week. We will have another show for you next week. Go check out Basket Under Review throughout the week leading up to all these games, to get some insights and knowledge. Check out the Discord. Check out our sponsor, Home Field. Thank you to them. Thank you to you, Tate. Thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thank you to Trilly Donovan. Thanks to the graphics guy, Sam Frayer, for Basket Under Review. All the people behind the scenes making it happen. We appreciate you, and we appreciate all of you for listening. Go leave us a review. I heard that's good for podcasts. I don't know much about it. Not really. It's not my forte, but if you want, leave us a 5-star review and say this show's awesome, and maybe more people discover it, and that'll be fun too. So thank you very much. We will be back next week with another episode. That's it for now. Bye-bye.